Hello there, and welcome to the Cat's Pyjamas. I'm so happy to have you here. But I can hear you asking, what exactly is this podcast all about? This podcast is all about language and words. So, if you're a word nerd, a bookworm, or you just love language, then this is the podcast for you. Over the coming episodes, I'll be looking at words and how we use them, and how our language has changed over time. I'll look at how language and literature have influenced our culture or been influenced by our culture or situations. So, are you ready to dive into the world of words? I've been doing some research about a common phrase used in the English language that inspired the name for this podcast. Have you ever heard the saying, "You're the cat's pajamas"? If someone has ever said it about you or something you've done, it means they think you're great. But where does it come from? The phrase originates way back in the 1920s. That's over 100 years ago. In the 1920s, the term cat was used to describe the flappers of the jazz era. Flappers were a cultural symbol of their time. A flapper was a young woman, generally with a short bob hairstyle, who wore shorter skirts and went dancing. They were girls who had grown up out of World War I and were at the front lines of the feminist movement. They were women who had just been granted the right to vote in the US, and they were joining the workforce in droves. They were young, fast-moving, fast-talking women who were unfazed by what society told them they should be. They worked more, studied more, got involved in politics, and generally shook up people's ideas of how women should behave or be treated. They were trendsetters. Pyjamas were also trend-setting and a relatively new fashion at the same time. And as people in the 1920s seemed fascinated with combining animal names with parts of the human body or an article of clothing, the cat's pyjamas was born. The term was used to describe something that is best at what it does, something which is excellent. Some other examples are the monkey's elbow, the eel's ankles, or the pig's wings. There were also other feline examples like the cat's whiskers or the cat's meow. This 1920s phase of animal hybrid names also changed the meaning of some previously used phrases, like the bee's knees. In the 18th century, this meant something tiny and insignificant. The change in meaning is probably because the sentence structure was similar to the other phrases used in the 1920s. So, if someone says you're the cat's pajamas or the bee's knees, it means they think you are pretty great. And that's one of the reasons I chose the cat's pajamas as the name for this podcast. Not only do I want to explore fascinating phrases and words and explore where our language comes from and what it can teach us, but I want to be excellent and to be the best at what I do. I want to be a young woman full of ambition and passion who stands out because of what I do. And I want the same thing for all of you. Our next generation should feel empowered to be everything and anything they want to be and more. So don't let society tell you how you should feel or behave. Reach for the stars and don't stop there, because you were made to stand out, to be a trendsetter, to be excellent. You are the cat's pajamas. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of The Cat's Pyjamas. If you check out the show notes for this episode, there are some great resources, including a word search and some book recommendations. If you have any phrases or words that you've been wondering about and you'd like me to look into, please find me on Instagram at The Diction Fairy or head to my website www.dictionfairy.com.au. I'd love to hear from you. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss out on new episodes. And if you enjoyed the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a review and tell your friends.